Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Ben Jones, and I have a very special guest with me today, the amazing Felecia Romero. And yes, man, you are in for a special treat. But first, I just want to say thank you to everyone for your likes, your follows, and sharing. This is a relatively new podcast, and seeing just so many of you are, giving positive feedback that this has had an impact, and you're being able to grow from it. So, that really makes me happy to hear, because it means that this message is having an impact, which is the goal. So one of the biggest things you could do is, if this is something that's helping you, make sure to leave a review, share this with a friend, and, let's get the word out. But I think really beyond that, man, the bigger thing is our amazing guest, Felecia Romero. So you need to just understand, before we dive into some of the incredible knowledge that she has, like of really who she is. So, she is an elite level athlete. She has really gone to the highest levels in the fitness world, and being an 8-time fitness model, IFBB pro. She has owned multiple personal training studios, sold them, and now has a passion for helping other entrepreneurs to be successful as a coach. And, is just really an amazing person. And so, Felicia, hey, welcome to the show.
Hello, friend. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I just read your bio, and I don't know if that really gives it full justice. And I think so people, as we're kicking this off.
Hard.
I know they are.
Bios are so hard. They're like, send me this bio, or I get asked this question a lot. I'm like, gosh, I don't know what to fit, or even like your Instagram bio. Right? I don't know what to fit in like 150 characters. I feel like I'm so much more than this. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, absolutely. And I think so everyone can know. I mean, I really, you have an amazing story, because you're an Arizona native. Is that right?
Arizona native, born and raised in Gilbert's. Yeah. Like literally remember I was at my mom's house recently, and she was cleaning out a room, and, she found a photo album, which we now don't have those as much anymore. We have these digital photo albums on our phone. But she had this photo album of the house that we grew up in. She still lives in the house that I grew up in. And seeing the photos, like behind the home was just like cotton fields. And like Ray Road was the furthest, like it was like out in the country, Ray Road. So now it's grown so much. And so to see the growth and to see all the change. But my mom still lives in the house I grew up in, which is really
That is pretty amazing. Yeah. And especially being an Arizona native. I am as well. My wife is as well. She actually went to Gilbert High. And
oh my gosh, you guys are Gilbert people too?
Well, my wife I was Mesa.
Oh, Mesa. Okay. So when did you graduate?
I was 05.
Okay.
Or 2005. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was 2000.
Okay.
So then I was at ASU when you registered. So I graduated from Arizona State with a bachelor's in 04 and then a master's in 07.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I also went to Arizona State, and there it is.
I would not be doing this interview if you were U of A.
I know. Especially I think when you go to U of A, that it's more of a religion down there than I think even with ASU up here, right? So
sure. And I played softball at Arizona State, so I was also an athlete in college, and so it was pretty brutal going down to Tucson and playing the U of A softball team, because they had one of the best softball teams at the time. They had a coach that was amazing, Mike Andrea. And like, no joke, the fans would spit on us.
Wow.
Literally parents. No, not fans. I should say parents were spitting on 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. So
crazy.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm sure you got some fun stories with that one. But, I think especially being an Arizona native and having such an impact here. I mean, it warms my heart. This is my home state. And I'm just curious, like, what was really your story? How did you get into fitness? And just because, especially getting to the peak levels, like what was your starting point, your origin story?
Such a great question. I'll try to kind of condense it, because it definitely can be a little long. So I grew up as an athlete. I played softball when I was young, little league, t-ball, volleyball, track. My mom was an athlete. So it was pretty much a no given that I was going to also play sports. I had an athletic family, but also my mom was very much as firstborn, first daughter born, and I also come from a Mexican family. My mom definitely pushed me. And so, started playing softball. I was on all the club teams, and then I continued to go on to Arizona State playing softball. And so I didn't actually, I worked out when I was young, but I also didn't grow up with any sort of diet culture or weightlifting. I just did it because I did it for a goal. I did it for a purpose. I remember my mom hiring a trainer when I was 14, 15. He was a sports and, conditioning trainer. So I did the deadlifts and the hang cleans, everything for speed and agility and all of those things. So when I got into college and I was studying law, I just had this natural inclination to help people. And so I was getting my bachelor's in political science, and I was going to Arizona State, and I had moved out, and I knew I needed to make money. And so my boyfriend at the time was a trainer, or actually a manager at a Gold's Gym. They've changed now, they're EOS. And they, he's like, hey, you should train people. And so I got certified and started training people out of my home when I was in college, because I could then make my schedule and still go to school.
Absolutely.
And I fell in love, Ben. Like, I knew that was my calling. I had no idea where it was going to take me. I had no idea that it would lead down the road of the fitness path that I have taken. But I do believe that when you are doing what you love, you can make money at it. And that's what continued for me. So I opened up my first gym at 22. It was this 1,500 square foot studio in Mesa. I remember at that time, which you're not going to believe this, but it was $1 a square foot. $1 a square foot. Yes. 1,500 square foot. So it's $1,500 a month. Like, I was making the money. I was so excited. And then I ended up opening up another gym. At that time, it was called AZ Pro Physiques. It's since changed, but I sold my ownership. I was co-owned by another partner. And then I opened up Fit Method a couple years later after my non-compete had expired. And, the rest is history. During that time, I started competing. I think because I was always an athlete. And so the thought of getting ready for something and training for something really interested me. And again, had no idea where that was going to take me, but I turned pro at my very first national show.
Yeah, so that's probably like a big thing. I mean, talk about that. What was that transition of being trainer to now becoming a professional athlete? And what was the highest placement that you had received?
The highest placing, I would say 4th in the world. So I got 4th at the Arnold, which was Figure International. And in my sport, when we think of like this, the Olympia or the Figure International, which is the Arnold, basically kind of like the Super Bowl of what I did. So at that time, in 2010, I placed 4th in the world.
That's pretty amazing. So then what's your story? How did you go from really just, all right, you're being the trainer, you're getting your gym up and going, to being literally the 4th?
Oh my gosh, this is such a fun story because I had no aspirations for fitness modeling. I didn't even know what it meant to be a pro. I love being in the gym. I loved the transformation that my body was making. I loved the discipline. Like, I was so attracted to that. I could eat the same thing every day. I could do the same thing every day. If you give me a plan, I'm very coachable. So that was very attractive to me, and I had no idea where it was going to take me. And so I just had these natural genetics. Had some shoulders, I had a smaller waist, I just had this shape of kind of like semi-gymnast, I guess you could say. So, I turned pro and again, had no idea where that was going to take me. But over the years, as you start evolving and growing, your body also shifts, the muscle maturity shifts. And I think, what happened was I am competitive. And I think with that sport, it's easy to get caught up in competing with others. It really is competition with yourself, but you are competing against other bodies, and it is subjective. And for the better part of 7-8 years, that really ruled my life. And I kind of moved myself up the ranks fairly quickly. I also think too, and I think this is what really helped me at the time, Ben, was I looked different than the other girls. The blonde hair, blue eye, I was not. So I was dark hair, more ethnic. And I think that also allowed for some opportunity, being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. There was nothing special about what I was doing because there were a lot of great girls. I just think it was timing and being in that right place at the right time.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I can imagine. I mean, it's pretty incredible to get to that level. I mean, like, what was probably, especially when you're on stage, how many people, when you're at the Arnold, were in the audience, do you think?
Oh my gosh. In the audience? Oh my goodness. So like for the night show, like the finals, we were a huge auditorium, or a huge venue. So thousands of people. And like, I got to meet Arnold, and I got to actually interview Arnold when I was working with bodybuilding.com, which was really cool. But yeah, I mean, it was really amazing when I think back at the opportunities and to get those opportunities. But yeah, it also came at a sacrifice. And I know we'll talk about that too, because to maintain that level of physique for that long, and for many years, I know there was one year where I did 6 competitions in 1 year, which is a lot, especially for a female to hold her body fat that low is really tough. So it did come at a sacrifice. And that's why for me, competing for 7-8 years, towards the last 2 years, my body started shutting down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, one of the not so great sides of this is, you were kind of talking about that you start going through this and that it's a lot of abuse to the body. And I mean, what are some of the, I don't know, just like elaborate on that. Like, what were some of the negative side effects that started happening that ultimately led you to get out of the competing?
Yeah. So in the beginning of the competition, or of me like dieting, because I was new to dieting, I didn't know how to diet. I remember looking up. So my very first competition, someone at the gym said, "Oh, Felicia, you should do the show." It was an NPC competition, and that NPC is the National Physique Committee. So essentially, it's the federation that basically gets you to the IFBB. So if you place first in the NPC show or a national show, it gets you to the pro ranking. And so I was like, okay, cool. Like, what do I have to do? Like, I knew nothing. Like, I'm going to tell you a story here in a little bit that's really hilarious. But like, do you remember bodybuilding.com?
Absolutely.
I think they're still around. I haven't been on the website in a while, but I'd go on bodybuilding.com and I'd research like competition diets. So I literally was dieting. My first couple years of dieting was like the hardcore bro bodybuilder, like no salt, no soda, all water, boiled chicken, broccoli. Like that's the way that I was eating for years before, flexible dieting came around and macros and all of that. And so that was how I was eating. And so I remember training for my first competition. And also training for my first competition, it was also the first time that I ever binged on food. I didn't even know what that was. And because I was restricting for so long, it led to a binge eating tendency. So I had that during that first training session, or that first competition training. And so I remember being on stage, and I remember I could not afford, so I was an intern at the time at Arizona State, and I could not afford the suits that the women wore, right? I mean, they were like hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Yeah. So I remember going to the lady and saying, "Hey, I need a suit, but I can't afford like this $400, $500 suit." She's like, "Okay, I'll make you a plain one. And you're just going to want to get this glue and you're going to pin it on yourself." And I was like, okay. And so I must have done something wrong because I was on stage in my very first show. And as I was posing, all of the little rhinestones were like flying off of my suit. So obviously I didn't do it right. So, that was my first show. 7 years later, I'm competing at the Olympia, the Arnold, and all of those things. So yeah.
That's pretty incredible. And I think especially with that, like, what was the mindset? You think like to succeed at that level? Mm-hmm. What was the mindset going into this?
So the mindset, you definitely have to have a level of discipline because you have this plan on paper of the things that you have to eat in order to get to the result you want, right? We all know what diets are. We all know, hey, we got eat this thing, eat this certain amount of calories, eat these macros to get to a certain result. Well, not only do you have that, but you have this time frame to do it. And you have this time frame of then you're going to step on stage half naked and you're going to be judged physically. So it's like, okay, there's that extra added stress, right? And so not only do you have to have the discipline, you have to have the willpower, you also have to have that mental relentless pursuit for perfection, essentially.
Absolutely.
Because, for me and for being judged on stage, they're judging for perfection. How much body fat, your symmetry, your athleticism, your lines, your body fat, like all of that comes into play along with your presentation and your looks and your hair and your makeup, and it all comes into play. You're literally competing for perfection. Yeah. And so that's really hard because, as you know, perfection isn't possible.
No, it's not.
It's not possible, but we're striving for it, So I think that for me, that's where the downfall started to happen, was because I had never been judged physically on my body. I didn't grow up in diet culture. I didn't grow up my mom dieting. My mom loved her body. Like I mentioned before, I grew up in a Mexican household, and if you aren't eating, or if you aren't, like something's wrong. Like, why are you not eating? You know what I mean? So like, I didn't grow up with that. So I didn't develop a lot of the body dysmorphia and the food disorder thoughts and eating until I actually started competing, until I started dieting.
That's right.
Right. And you could probably, I mean, you're probably experienced with this too. Like, you know, we can all, I think, argue at, you know, diets work, but then diets don't work.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if like, when we think of dieting, we think of restriction. And what happens to our brain when we want to restrict? What happens when someone tells us we can't do something?
Well, of course, we want to do more. We want that thing, right?
We want it. We want it even more. Like, it's this weird brain, you know, that happens in our brain whenever we're told we can't have something or we can't do something. It tends to then kind of sit in our brain and we think about it even more. So, you know, when you're on this restriction, and for me, this led to competing, getting into the best shape of my life physically. And then right when the show was done, I would then binge eat. So for many competitors, I don't know if you ever competed. Have you ever competed?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Do you have an aspiration?
At some point, I have a goal of doing at least once.
Yeah.
Doing it once.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome. But, you know, what happened was, you know, we would compete and we would work out every single day, sometimes twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day on these crazy diets. And then right when the competition was done, I would do the exact opposite of what I've been doing for the last 12, 16 weeks. So what do you think your body's going to do when you have been so strict, so, you know, working out from going from that to binging and no training for a couple of weeks?
Oh, absolutely. It's going into starvation mode. We need to start packing on weight.
And it's going to hold on to the weight. So when you've been starving yourself and you haven't kind of like, think about, you know, your car and not having any gas, it's like, you know, when you have been doing that to your body, naturally, the thing that you do eat and binge on, it's going to want to conserve it. And so after every competition, I would put on 10 pounds quickly. And then within a couple weeks, I would probably put on a good 15, 20 pounds. I'm not a large person. That's a lot of weight on a body.
Yeah.
And so I was always battling that then, from extreme weight loss to then gaining weight to then having to lose it again for the next competition. And it was just this constant all year long.
Absolutely. And I mean, and this is one of the, in some ways, the darker sides. People don't really see this. It's very much glamorized of being, you know, some of the most fit people in the world, right? But there's this other side that's, you know, I've heard that runs rampant in the industry. And I mean, maybe talk a little bit about what is this, the whole thing with the body dysmorphia, you know, the things, and what ultimately led to you deciding that you were done.
Yeah. So for those that may not know what body dysmorphia is, there are different cases in which you can have body dysmorphia. So it's essentially you look in the mirror and you don't see what others see. You may see yourself as very overweight or fat, or for a lot of men, maybe they get body dysmorphia. They don't feel like they're large enough. You know, they suffer like, hey, I gotta get bigger. And so, so I had literally gotten into the best shape of my life for these competitions, seeing my stomach. I have this 6-pack and I'm Shalina. I have these veins in my arms and my legs are so cut. And, you know, getting under 10% body fat is not something that you can maintain for long periods of time. So when I would see that and then I didn't see that anymore, I would want that. Or, you know, I can't tell you how many times, and I cringe at this, some of my old social media posts where I'd post a photo and I was clearly in shape, like looking back now, but the caption would read, I'm so bloated today. I don't know if you've ever seen those posts from girls who you're like,
I think I probably have. Yeah.
And it's like, I look at the photo, I'm like, Felicia, what are you thinking? And first of all, who cares? You know, like, I think when I know that I've healed is when I can look back at that. I'm like, okay, I know where I was physically. I know where I was mentally. And physically, people may see me as a certain way, but I don't see it and I don't feel it. And mentally, I'm struggling. And so it's, you know, for me, I struggled with that for years, always trying to strive to that competition lean all of the time. I remember pinching my stomach so much so, like pinching the fat on my stomach so much that I would actually get bruises on my stomach because of it, you know? So it took a couple years to heal from that. But yeah, it was pretty severe, and it can happen. I mean, look at social media now. women comparing themselves to other women, filters, so women distorting their bodies to look a certain way. And I think it's worse now than ever because we didn't have social media when we were younger. So
this is very true. And especially a big thing that we talk about is hormone health.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that the hormones in your body, like that's what drives everything. And if that's off, it messes everything up. And I mean, I know you have a story with this because you would definitely mess up your system after coming out of this. And what was the story? Like, what were you dealing with and what did you do to overcome this?
Yeah. So this was 2012 when I had done my last competition and I had competed in India. And I remember being on the airplane back home, knowing that I was retiring. Like this was done, like my body, it was so hard to get in shape. And for those that, and specifically speaking to people who are yo-yo dieters, if you are a yo-yo dieter, constantly dieting and then, increasing calories and dieting and that yo-yo effect, it will screw up your metabolism over time. Basically, I remember talking with a naturopath. Actually, I had Dr. Christensen on my podcast. When he's a naturopath, he works with thyroid health and he's a he works specifically with autoimmune diseases. And essentially what had happened with me and what happens to a lot of competitors, men and women, is when you go low for so long with calories, with fats, with carbs, the first thing that usually shuts down is your pituitary gland, so your adrenals. And so imagine you trying to get through a workout or trying to get through your day without any fuel in your body, right? So essentially that's what happened to me. Pituitary gland, my adrenals shut down, which then affected my hormones, which then affects my thyroid. So it's all connected. And my testosterone plummeted, my estrogen increased. And so I remember my body just could not produce testosterone. It's like all it wanted to do was be in this estrogenic state. Obviously, I'm not a doctor or naturopath, so I can't talk about the specifics of why that happens, but that's essentially what happened to me. And so I had become hypothyroid, underactive thyroid for about 7 years, and I was on medication for it. And so what happens with that is inability to lose weight. So essentially when your thyroid is underactive, your ability to metabolize, so basically your metabolism, decreases by 25%. And so it was really hard to lose weight. I had a ton of water weight, so lots of bloat, my fingers, my face, my stomach, my legs, everything. I was probably, from where I'm at now, probably about 40 pounds heavier than what I'm at this moment. And I was really struggling. So no matter what I did, and when I dieted, Ben, when I went back to I just got to diet to lose this weight, it only made it worse. Because when you have an autoimmune or a thyroid disorder, the harder you diet and the more you work out, you actually do the opposite.
Yeah.
Your body gains weight and you start to bloat and hold water.
Yeah, people don't realize that. It's kind of counterintuitive. And sometimes to fix it, it's increasing calories.
Yeah.
Even backing off some of the workouts to some extent. So, yeah, I guess then you went through this. You had almost this complete slingshot effect.
Yeah.
How did you fix it?
Ooh, well, first off, I want to mention this because I feel like, especially with thyroid, I used to get the question a lot from women, how did you get off your medication? I want to know, I don't want to be on medication anymore. And so, I was told this by a doctor, and it always stuck with me. Sometimes the goal maybe not be to get off the medication. Maybe you want to thrive and you just want to feel energetic. You want to optimize your health. I was able to come off because mine was brought on by stress and extreme lifestyle. But first and foremost, the answers I may share may shock you, but I'm going to share them anyways. And then I'll obviously get into some other things that I did, tangible things that people can do in order to heal, men and women. But my first step was to see a counselor. So I saw a therapist and I healed basically my orthorexia, the inability to only eat clean and only diet. I had to stop. I had to stop dieting. I had to stop looking at food as good or bad, right or wrong. I had to stop putting food on a pedestal. I had to stop attaching this moral code to food and just find my baseline again, where, and a lot of people would think that, something like this. So I would say like, okay, I'm just going to stop dieting. I'm going to eat what I want. And so some people would call this intuitive eating. And, sometimes intuitive eating gets a bad rap. So like, oh, if I intuitively ate, I'm just going to eat donuts all day. Oh, no, that's not going to happen. I promise you that won't happen. But in the beginning, you may put on a little weight, unfortunately. Your weight loss should not be the goal as you're healing. And so I had to come to terms again with what I enjoyed, what foods I enjoyed. I had to come to terms with understanding my hunger cues, not binging, fueling my body, nurturing my body, nourishing my body. And so that took some time, and I actually had to seek a therapist for that because I had spent so many years competing and viewing my body in a certain way that my mental health was really destroyed. And so that took some time.
Yeah, well, and that's something like, honestly, it's a good point. I mean, there's things I've seen a therapist for myself of things like, especially coming back from overseas, and it's almost like this unsaid thing that it's almost like taboo. Like you don't want to talk about it, but I think if your mindset, if you're not right up here, it has a downward effect.
Oh, for sure. Well, let me share, like everyone wants the tactics. Everyone wants the tools. Tell me what to do. Oh, I want to heal. What should I do to heal? And people want that. I get it. Like, oh, like, how much should I exercise? Should I not exercise? Like, how many calories should I get? What food should I stay away from? Yeah, those are all great things to know and learn, and we can talk about that. But you're right. Like, without mindset, you can't have the strategy. Just like without strategy, without a mindset, it's sort of like, hey, if someone tells you, like, this is what you need to do in order to lose 3% of your body fat, here's the diet, here's the workout. But if you haven't instilled the habits and the mindset and your why, essentially, your motivator has to be bigger than the body fat, because motivation comes and goes. You have to actually have the small daily habits and disciplines in order to get the results you want. And it's actually just the little things that we do each and every day. Getting up in the morning. And what is your morning routine? If you always push the snooze button, even though you want to go to the gym, well, that's the first step. It's just spending 30 minutes in the gym, right? Don't even think about the body fat. You just have to get the basics down. And so for a lot of people, they always want the strategy. I teach this in business as well. Like, oh my gosh, teach me how to make 6 figures this year. I was like, okay, we can do that. I can give you the roadmap, but do you inherently believe that you can get there? Do you believe in yourself? Are you going to show up when your business isn't working? Are you going to show up when the scale says you're up 2 pounds? Because for a lot of people, we set our standards on these expectations that we set for ourselves. And then when we don't hit those expectations, sometimes unrealistic expectations. I mean, how many times have women come to you, and men, I want to lose 10 pounds in 10 days. Can you help me? Like we see that, but we're like, okay, beyond the weight, like, okay, let's just talk about what we're going to do today and what small habits you can do each and every day to get you there eventually, right? And so it's like, if we don't have that first, we will never stick to the strategy.
No, this is very true. And, since you bring it up, like, what is your morning routine? Like, what does that look like now that you've gone through this whole healing process? And, like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love this question because, again, I always like to shock people with answers. I'd love to say that I am like this 7-figure entrepreneur that gets up and meditates in the morning and does a 10-minute cold plunge and drinks the green juice and does the sauna session and then reads 10 pages in a book. Like, we've all read these entrepreneurship books. Nothing wrong with them. I think they're great. Like, there are certain things that successful people do that allows for success. And I think if we were to take a round robin of, 7-figure, 8-figure entrepreneurs, we can find some commonalities between them.
Absolutely.
But what I will say is a lot of people, again, try to do things that may not be aligned with their life and lifestyle. And so, again, it's finding something that works for you. So for me, it's making an appointment at Fit Body Bootcamp. I get my 8 o'clock session in, but I love long mornings, slow mornings. As a person that used to get up at 4:30 in the morning to train or teach a class at 5:30 or teach a client, I don't love rushing in the morning to appointments, to different things. So the way that I've allowed myself to be productive in my life is to know that I've time blocked from, 6:30 in the morning till around 9:30 is my time to work out, to drink a cup of coffee and sit and think about my day, to look at my calendar, to possibly read, a couple pages or listen to an Audible or listen to a podcast, kind of gear up what I'm doing for the day. And so I need that for my mental health, because in a place when I used to wake up with major anxiety and having to rush everywhere first thing in the morning, I know that I can't have that. So I love to have that flow in the morning. But my morning routine does include movement always, does include some sort of like guided meditation or something that allows me to just like think about my day and what I need to do and put my head in the right mental space. And that is a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things, like, especially owning businesses, we've all been through those crazy times and just running around, minimal sleep. And yeah, I get it. I mean, your routine sounds very similar to mine. It is get up, it's the workout, it's reading, it's, taking some time to get the tone of the day right and focus on, what? I think the other thing, too, I love about working out in the morning is, even if everything else in the day goes south, and it's just one of those days, at least I started it with a win.
Yeah.
And I did something where, I was working on myself. I did an accomplishment. There's something where I'm leaving that workout knowing, man, I feel good.
Mm. It will literally shift me. Like, for instance, okay, so I shared this thing on Mother's Day. I shared this really vulnerable post on Mother's Day. And, I've had trouble, like, I don't think I'll have the ability to actually, like, have a child myself naturally. And we may not, my fiance and I may not have any children, although I am a bonus mom to his son, Rylan. He's so great. But I had this thing come over me on Mother's Day, and it was just very emotional, very vulnerable. And I shared something on social media, on TikTok and Instagram. And it went viral on both platforms. Wow. And so, what was crazy about that is vulnerability. And then you get this like influx of comments, people supporting, but also a lot of negative, and so I remember on Mother's Day, I had made this post and then I put my phone away, like I go hang out with family. I go back to Instagram later on that night and TikTok, and I was like, oh, like all of these, like thousands of comments. And as I was reading some of them, even like people in the comments are fighting each other. Like, wow. And I'm like, my nervous system was all over the place. My heart started beating really fast. I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I'm not going to look at this, because I do believe it's important to protect your peace. So I shut down the Instagram, the TikTok, and I put my phone away, put on the do not disturb, and I said, okay, I'm not going to tackle this or even respond to this until after my workout tomorrow. And so put my phone away, woke up the next morning, went to an 8 o'clock Fit Body Bootcamp class, and it put me in this like frame of mind that it allowed me to figure out what I wanted to say and do, but it also allowed me to like calm my nervous system and approach it from a very balanced and centered place.
Absolutely.
And that was because I worked out. Absolutely. And I moved my body.
And this is the thing, especially with so much anxiety, depression, one of the greatest things is just working out. I mean, I've felt it myself. There's been times where just even recently, I had to take a couple weeks off, and I just started feeling myself get into this funk. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how much of an impact. And I'm sure, you obviously can relate to that.
100%.
And it's just, I don't know, it's very interesting hearing you say that, and especially with just, man, you obviously are a successful entrepreneur yourself. Mm-hmm. You've got, man, so many stories that you could share beyond even the time we have for this. But I even think now, having multiple gyms sold and moving into what you're doing now, like how everything you just talked about, obviously this is a big part of what you're passionate about now. Maybe talk about what's your business now? Like what are you passionate about? Like what are you working on now?
Yeah, great question. So before I actually talk about that, I think it's important to talk about, especially for people that are listening, to know and to discern when it's time to pivot. And when it's time to change direction, and to know changing direction or choosing to close something down or choosing to give something up doesn't have to be how should I say this? It doesn't have to be looked at as a failure. It's just, hey, I'm discerning where I'm at right now, and am I happy? Is this making me happy? And when is it time to move on?
Absolutely.
And so that has been my life, from, deciding to not go to law school and opening up my first gym, from having business partners, from business partners failing, to being sued, to also suing, to like having all of these different things throughout my 20s and 30s and the legalities, and knowing, okay, it's time to move on. And that was my last gym, Fit Method. I loved it. The culture that we built there was so amazing and so fantastic. But I knew that my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I also, again, back to protecting my peace. Anytime that I feel like my life is out of sorts, or the stress is out of hand and it's actually affecting my mental health, that I know that it's time for something to change. And so I was feeling it at that time and decided to move on, because one of my core values is time. It's one of the currencies we don't get back. And I wanted more time with my family and pursue things that are really, really meaningful for me. And I felt at that time the gym was really just sucking everything from me. Not the actual people or the culture or the gym or what we built, but just the business side of it.
Yeah.
And so, pivoted into the online space. And so, fitness is always a big part of my life. So I have a whole corporate wellness sector of my business, where I've worked with these companies for years and years and years virtually. And I do consulting, but I also mentor. I mentor fitness coaches and coaches in the online space to not just be able to learn how to stop trading time for money and to be able to build multiple streams of income, but to really learn how to be a leader, how to step into their power, how to lead in their own lives. I read this thing recently. I think it was an article. One of the top indicators of life satisfaction is being able to be in control of your own life. And for me, money is that for me. Money doesn't buy happiness, obviously, but money does give you the flexibility to pursue things that are really meaningful for you. So that's what I like to teach people, because I've been able to do that in my own life.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And honestly, this is just one of those things that I think you're hitting on some, I think, great stuff. It's these mindsets, right? And so I just say, if you were to pick like 3 mindsets, you think like to be a successful entrepreneur, I mean, this is to be a high performer, those things that you think have led to your success, those 3 mindsets, what would that be?
Definitely resiliency.
Okay.
You have to be resilient. Like entrepreneurship, there are ebbs and flows in life. Like being a resilient human, you almost have to expect the failures. If you're not failing, then you're actually not going to succeed. Like you have to go through the failures. So resiliency comes with that. Having discipline. I know this may be like unpopular opinion, but discipline's a good thing. Like discipline actually leads to freedom.
It does.
It does. So when you are disciplined with your health or with what you're wanting to create with your business, it leads to the freedom that you desire. If you desire wealth, you desire health, you desire to have energy and to thrive, you're going to have to be somewhat disciplined in order to achieve it. So discipline leads to freedom. So resiliency, discipline. And the last one is joy. Have fun. Like if you're not having fun, I really try to approach everything that I do, whether it's a program that I'm creating, a retreat that I'm hosting, or even this podcast that I'm on. I know I set the intention in my car before I popped in. I'm like, I'm going to have fun with this. Like, why not? And so like, if you don't have that, then it just makes the journey miserable. One of those things that I look back on, I want to say this really quick.
Yeah.
I get this question all the time. Like, if you could go back and change anything. And honestly, like when I was competing, I didn't stop to smell the roses. I'm an Enneagram 3, for those that don't know, like high performer, high achiever, want to do the things. And like every time I did something, Ben, you might relate to this too. Like you do something, but then it's like, oh, what's next?
I'm the exact same way. This is something I've had to really work on myself.
What next? Like, okay, doesn't mean that I may never be content. That's okay. It's okay to want more. But I also think it's important to stop and smell the roses. Like celebrate what you built here in Arizona, right? Like all of these gyms. Like, can we just stop and celebrate that? Like that's amazing, right? And so like, can we just stop and celebrate this moment and have fun? And I think that's really important in order to have this like good quality of life.
It is. It is. I mean, you dropped some very powerful things. I mean, and these are lessons I personally subscribe to. Even just something that failure.
Mm-hmm.
People look at failure as a bad thing, and I just try to get people to think about, are you looking at it from a victim mindset of why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Or being grateful that, you know what, maybe this is uncomfortable at the moment, but I'm going to get better, stronger. I'm going to get a lesson from this that's going to make me better prepared for something else.
Oh my gosh. Failure is a requirement.
It is.
It's a requirement. Like I talk a lot. I'm not going to like get into like the woo woo because I'm sometimes a little bit spiritual woo woo. But like if we were just to even talk about manifestation and manifestation being your goal, you want this thing. Like let's say you want to open up your own gyms one day, or you want to be like Ben, or you want to speak on big stages, you want to write a book. The thing is, or you want your perfect partner or perfect house, whatever it is. So like think of yourself as this energy bubble, right? You have your manifestation right here. It's like in hindsight, you can see it. You can't quite touch it yet, but it's there. And there's this little ball there with your manifestation. Many of us want that straight shot. We want to just get there. We're like, why can't we have it already? Like, why can't I just be, this person? Or why can't I just have this yet? Or why can't I just meet the partner or be in the dream home? The thing is, you are not yet the person. The reason you don't have it is because you're not yet the person that can hold that sort of energy, right? This is why lottery winners within the first 5 years go bankrupt. They haven't become the person that they need to be in order to manage millions of dollars, right? Versus someone who actually had the tools to create it. You read this in the book, The Slight Edge, great book. And so, sometimes maybe ask yourself, who do you need to become in order to achieve the thing? And this is the person you're becoming is the person you're becoming through the failures.
Absolutely.
The person you're becoming with all the obstacles, the struggle, the downfall, that is the person that is growing because of it. And that right there is how you're going to get to your goal, your manifestation, whatever it's going to be. It's like as you are vibrating, as you are growing as a human, what is naturally going to happen? We're going to hit that goal. Absolutely. And so, so many of us think like, when am I going to get there? The better question is like, who do I need to become in order to achieve it? And so, so that's super important to me.
And that's just, I think is probably one of the most important mindsets anyone could have in life. I think that's the number one thing that probably holds so many people back.
Yeah.
Is again, it's looking at obstacles and failures. I like to compare it to, you work out at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You've done it many times. You those workouts, you go to complete muscle failure. You're so sore, you can barely move.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what happens? You get stronger, you get better, your body's better equipped to deal with it next time, to when you go through that enough times, you don't even get sore anymore. And it's the same thing with these things in life,
Yeah, absolutely. I think Elon Musk, I was watching the whole SpaceX documentary, and it's so important. Like, he's obviously on a whole different scale, but like he has these rockets that are like millions of dollars. And he said something so pivotal. Like he created this rocket to go to SpaceX, and he's like, oh yeah, this one probably is going to fail. This one's not going to work. There's no humans in it. There's just no testing it. And he already anticipated it because he knew it's going to take 10 or 15 times to get to the rocket that's going to get to space. He anticipated the failure.
Absolutely.
He knew the failure was going to get him closer to the rocket that was going to take him up. So I think that's really important to note. Obviously, he's playing with millions and millions of dollars. I unfortunately don't do that, but it's important just to think about that in your daily life.
Oh, it is. Yeah. But, another philosophy I've thought about is, just if you're not doing something that makes you sick to your stomach, that gives you butterflies, like you're not challenging yourself. Like if you're living inside your comfort zone, you're never really going to live to your full potential, right?
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Well, no, that's pretty exciting. So last few questions on this one, all right, especially because, one of my passions is being able to help men, and I think help them be better leaders. And one of these big things is hormone health. Yes. And I know we were talking about this a little bit. So I think first with this question, all right, talking about this scenario, all right, just to speak truth on this one, all right?
Truth, okay.
So from a wife's perspective that's super fit, is the trophy wife, the hot wife, right, but has the overweight husband that's rocking the dad bod.
Mm-hmm. Dad bod.
Yeah. From a woman's perspective, what do you think about that? What would you say to the men?
What would I say? Okay. I we had a conversation about this prior to the podcast. I am not in the business of body shaming, because I think even for like a woman going through pregnancy, for instance, and having like the postnatal, like I would hate for her husband to be like, hey, I work out. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, so like, you know, I'm not in the business of body shaming, but I am in the business of recognizing when someone is hurting or someone is struggling. And so like, even in my own personal story, and this is something I've talked about as well, I'm engaged to my high school sweetheart, and we reconnected after so many years. You know, and I actually didn't realize after the first year or two we got back together, he had some insecurities, because he had seen this person who's been on covers of magazines, and I've hung out with like, bodybuilders and men that are in fantastic shape, and I didn't realize, but he had some insecurities around that. And I always want to make sure my partner feels safe, feels secure, feels, I affirm him and I tell him I'm attracted to him and all of those things. I think that's really important. But I did notice probably year 4, actually this was last year, he was going through some stress and he started to get the belly, right? He started to get, I noticed a difference in his moods. He started to get really depressed. I started drinking more alcohol on the weekends, more beer, totally not like him. Like he'll have a drink every now and then, but like it started to become more frequent. Make really bad food choices. And I was like, hey, like, is something going on here? Like I noticed something happening again, even like a change in his body. And what I didn't realize is he was dealing with a lot of stress. And I feel like men who are dealing with things don't have a men group to like chat with, or girls, we do. We meet up on the weekends when we are like at dinner. We're not talking about the weather. We're talking about some deep stuff. And so like, for him, he doesn't have any close guy friends that he can really speak to or talk to about these things. And so I think for him, he was holding it all in. And it turned into his testosterone plummeting, and he started developing anxiety, and a lot of things were happening hormonally. And so that's when I suggested from a very loving place, like, maybe you should get something checked out. Like maybe you should go and like talk to a hormone specialist. And he did. And he realized that his testosterone was extremely low, which was then causing the low sex drive, causing the low not being motivated, depressed, and also, bad food choices and lack of sleep. Like it was affecting everything. And so if he hadn't done that and gotten tested and gotten his testosterone, and now he takes, the shots, he's a totally different person now. Totally different person. He's motivated. He's taken action. He gets conscious about what he's eating. He's working out. Like totally different person than he was a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is that there's so many guys in this situation.
Yeah.
Suffer in silence. Think about it.
Do you have a guy group that you speak to? Like because we call it like sisters or sisterhood. Like, do you have like a manhood? Like,
I mean, I've got a core group of guys that, we bring this up. Even part of this program has come from my own personal struggle.
Do you guys talk about these things? Like, do you talk about your like deeper, like problems in marriage or problems with like anxiety? Like, do you guys talk about these things?
I'm going to say with some, yes. Others are like, I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on the individual and how much personal growth they've gone through. I mean, I think there's
like chin development, personal development, emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think especially with the hormone health, I mean, that's a huge thing. I just see with so many guys suffer in silence. They go through this cycle and things start happening. Their bodies are changing in a not great way. And it really comes back to this one thing, is testosterone.
Yeah.
And if that's off, it has this, spiral effect and everything.
Yeah.
So.
And, I think it's really interesting too, like you just said, suffer in silence. I think sometimes guys may even feel embarrassed. Sometimes if they're like, well, this is what's happening, like sexually, for instance, and they might be embarrassed to talk about that sort of stuff, right? Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it is. I mean, I think as most men, we don't want to show weakness, right? And this is something that, especially when this is off, it shows up in every area.
Yeah.
I mean, what you just described. I mean, but it's such a simple fix too.
Such a simple fix.
And it's a complete game changer. So, well, I think with that, all right, last question here. I always love this one.
Okay.
At the end of your life, you're looking back, you're an old woman, what's the legacy you want to leave?
It's a great question. The legacy I want to leave is to know that, for me personally, that I lived life to the fullest, that I didn't waste my time here on earth, and that I made a difference, not only in the people that I help, but something that is really important to me is making a difference with my family, and to know that I had this ripple effect on the close people in my life, and to know that I could inspire them to go after their dreams. And so, yeah, and to know that, I live life to the fullest. I think it's really important to know, I don't know if you experience this, but as an adult, I feel like time is just flying by. Weeks, months. I feel like when you're a kid, summer break feels like forever. But as an adult, the years and months just fly by. So time is really important to me. And so one thing that I'm really, really passionate about is being really intentional about the time that I spend with the people that I love. And it's really important to me.
Oh, it is. It's I see every year goes by faster and faster, and that thought is always in my mind. Right?
Yeah. You know who inspires me? Jesse Itzler. He is he's building his resume. He has this whole thing building. I'm I'm so inspired. He's doing the thing. He's always doing something, and he's building his life resume, and he's not wasting any time. And I see that, and I'm just so inspired by that. I signed up for piano lessons last year and learned how to play the piano. And I know we have a mutual friend, Mike Arcee, who also, inspired me. He was just on my podcast recently, and he's always he's learning French now because he wanted to go to Paris or France. He's always doing the thing. And so I just find that so inspiring. It's what are you doing with the time that you have? Have you ever read that book? It's called The 5 Regrets of the Dying.
And I have not heard of that one, so I'll have to add that.
Her name is Bonnie Ware, and she did this whole interview. She interviewed thousands and thousands of people on their deathbed. The top 5 regrets of the dying. Number 1 was, I wish that I had lived a life that was true to myself and not what others wanted. Number 2 was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard and that I had more fun. Number 3 was, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Number 4 was, I wish I spent more time with friends and family. And lastly was I wish I chose to be happy. Because essentially we have the choice. We all have a choice on how we want to wake up in the day, how we want to choose to spend our time, the mindset we want to go in our day. We all have this choice. And so knowing that the regret of the dying was, I wish I just chose to be happy. I wish I let myself be happy, I think is such an important thing. And again, no matter the circumstance, right? Because we all are built with all of these different circumstances. And so, I thought that was really interesting.
That's super profound. Mm-hmm. You know what, Felicia, I could keep asking you so many questions because I know you have such incredible knowledge, but I think, because I can't, because we'd be here all day. Where can people find you and follow you? Because you have just such an amazing heart and content, the things that, just what drives you. So where can people hear more from you and more of what you do?
Yes, I hang out over on Instagram. So it's probably the easiest way to connect with me. Obviously, I have a website, FeliciaRomero.com, Instagram @Felecia Romero. I do all the social media. So I'm on TikTok and Instagram now, the new threads, I'm on it. And then I have a podcast called the Hi Felicia Podcast, where I talk with a lot of awesome people. I'm going to be amping it up over on the podcast. So I just hit 500,000 downloads. So awesome. Really exciting. And but yeah, that's where you can find me.
Well, everyone give her a follow, as this has been truly an honor to be able to talk with you today. And I know that I got a lot out of our conversation. I hope everyone else did here. So again, if you found this valuable, which I'm sure you did, make sure that you give this episode a like, send it to someone that you think can help, and make sure that you check out Felicia, follow her, and check out her podcast, which is also pretty incredible. And with that, you know what? I appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you on the next show.